Hello, my name is Kevin and this is the Love Decanters channel. So as I'm a man of my word, I said I would do a video about Georgian decanter shapes because there's some inconsistencies in the way the books are describing them. So what I've done is I've set out a whole bunch of books on my dining room table, and we can run up and down them and see, work my way through this shape and then see what it says about them, and you can see where those consistencies are. The decanter, well, the video that I did that kind of like started this off was the one on taper, which is probably the least controversial. Everybody agrees this is what a taper is, and so anyway, with that, I'm going to shut this and scoot off to the dining room. Okay. So I'm going to start out by just going through the books I have, just so that you can see. The first one I'm going to show you is The Decanter, an illustrated history of glass from 1650 by Andy McConnell. Next I have The Book of Wine Antiques by Butler and Gillian Walkling. Then I have The Dictionary of British Glass by Douglas Ash. I also have Collecting Decanters by Jane Hollingsworth. This is a Christie's book. I then have, that's Douglas Ash again, but anyway, it's got some different things in it. So, and then I have the Arthur Negus Guide to Glass by John Brooks. And the book that I'm not going to use, which is really funny because I love this book, English Bottles and Decanters, 1650 to 1900 by Derek Davis. Because after I thought, I'll use this book, he seems to have gone out of his way to actually not include any shape names. So so that I thought that was really funny, but yeah, it is what it is. So I'm going to start with the least controversial shape, which is the taper. Andy McConnell lays out his book with actual decanters, and as you can see, this is very like the ones I was showing in my video on Georgian taper decanters. He calls it taper, and there's also, he introduces a new shape which I've not seen, which is a shoulder taper. So that's quite interesting. Then in Robin Butler book it's a taper, and you can see it's the same shape. Then Douglas Ash describes it as taper as well, or no, he calls it tapering. And Jane Hollingsworth, this is 18L, and she calls it tapered as well. And so I have no idea why I've included this book, because all they do, well, I suppose from one point of view, because they don't only give dates, they're actually not naming the shapes. I just realised that. Why did I do that? I just thought, all these pictures, but when you look down here, come on, focus, there we go. For the rings, he's telling you what the ring types are, and he's telling you what the years are. I don't know if that's really supposed to be a taper. That might be supposed to be a taper, but with rings, 70, 70, 70, 90, which would be the dates I would normally give. There we go with taper. So back again with Andy McConnell, I'm going to look at shoulder decanters now. You can see here that he's got it curving in a little bit here for this one that he's showing. So that's the first one I'm going to look at, and they have the same shape there. See it curving in. And I'm going to skip that one. I think I might have missed that. And do they have, so and you can see here that's folding in. However, when we get to Douglas Ash here in this book, shouldered decanters, and he's got that shape, but he's also got that shape and that shape. And I think, hang on, if I go back to Andy McConnell, one of those, looking over there, straight-sided mallet, this is more like, well, that's more like the shoulder tapering, and that's more like the straight-sided mallet. So yeah, we've got a slight inconsistency there. So back with Andy McConnell, we have here Sugarloaf or Mallet decanters. So I always call them Sugarloaf. I think it sounds better. It's got a story behind it. I'll come back to that in a second before I move on. And in Butler, there is called Mallet. And then this is the closest to it in. Let me just double check on the other page. I don't think it is on the other page. Yeah, no, it's not there. So this is the closest in Jane Hollingsworth, Christie's book. And she calls it bell-shaped decanter. Sorry about my voice going there. And obviously, yeah, that's like a mallet a bit. So yeah, in Douglas actually lumps them all together as shouldered. Oh, and in here, they date it 1760 to 1770. So in Andy McConnell, this is the Prussian shaped decanter here. Yep, and that shape is called Classic in the Robin Butler book. And I'm going to skip over to Jane Hollingsworth. And yeah, if you look at this, this is the Prussian one. Look how fat that is by comparison. Yeah, and then if you look at it on here, Douglas Ashe is calling these Prussians. That one's almost cylinder shape. This one's a bit fatter in the middle, but still nowhere near as fat as this one. So you can see level of variation. I think that's what's supposed to be Prussian here. Obviously they don't name it, but the dates would be right for Prussian, so yeah. So next I'm going to show you Shaft and Globe. So this is Andy McConnell's book, and this is one where you can't just take a simplistic view of it. So yeah, so this is the early Georgian one. Here's another one, 1690 is the date he's got on this one, 1675 on that one. And then if I go over the page, let's see if I can find it. What I'm looking for. Oh yeah, I'll also point out this is a Mel decanter. This is a shape that doesn't appear in the other books. But yeah, they're out there. And if you look at the dates of those are quite interesting, 1830 to 1850. And then we have what he calls a compressed shaft and globe. Okay, so if I then go over to this book, he's got shaft and globe here, but he's got it down with the really early stoppers. So he doesn't mention it as a later shape. Oh, hang on, what's this here? Oh, so he does talk about Victorian ones with shaft and globe. And then Jane Hollingsworth has got shaft and globe here, which looks like, and that's why I showed you the Pell decanter, because it looks more like the Mel decanter, I should say. Sorry, that's my screw up. So, and then this is amongst the early stuff, and then she gets back to, she calls this a Victorian shaft and globe, which I think the similar shaped one in Andy McConnell. If I scoot back over here, so she calls it just Victorian shaft and globe, and he calls it compressed shaft and globe. And yeah, it doesn't really exist apart from, they only have it as a 1850 to 1900, which is a Victorian shape. I suppose the only difference is that this one's got a lip. I haven't got a page, no, there isn't. So yeah, that's what they've got here. Next I'm going to talk about three shapes, the Nelson, the Royal and the Fancy, because they're all from an Apsley pellet advert from 1839. My brain serves me right, yeah. So anyway, so Andy McConnell has got this down as a Regency cylinder or Nelson. The Royal and the Nelson are both cylinder types, but I wouldn't count this as a Nelson. I'll show you why in a minute. But he does have the fancy, and that is straight out of the Apsey pellet advert, that shape. So he's drawn there. In the Robin Butler book, they don't bother with that. They just call it square shoulder, which is a cylinder, but there's no differentiation, or a pillar, which is a type of cutting, but it's got nothing to do with the shape. Then I'll skip over to James Hollingsworth book from Christie's. She's got, this is a Nelson type, 19A, if you look, A1. She's got 19A2 and 19A3. So that's a Royal, that's a fancy. But yeah, when she's laid them out, she's saying the Royal, the Nelson, the fancy. In actual fact, she's switched the two names around. She hasn't clarified that anywhere. So if you were following this book alone, you would get the Royal and the fancy, the Royal and the Nelson mixed up. However, the nice man, Douglas Ash, his clearly represents what's in the Apsey palette advert. That's a Nelson. That's a Royal. That's a fancy. And this is just a, he's calling this just a standard cylinder decanter. In here, the date he's given is 1830 for the, that would count as a Royal. I'm going to talk about a shape that only appears in a couple of them, which is these pedestal decanters. And he calls this one a baluster and this one an urn. It doesn't appear in this book or any of these books. It does appear in the Christie's book. It's here. So this is the baluster pedestal one. The only problem is that in here it's called a cordial decanter. So yeah, different name. So here's another one I'm going to talk about, ship's decanters. He's called it Rodney or ship's decanters. Rodney relates to an admiral, so yeah, ships. I even looked in the index for this, there's no ship's decanters apparently. And yeah, here it is in the Christie's book. In here, obviously they don't name it, but they've got it a slightly different shape. Yeah, this is still a ship's decanter. So some of them though, so if you look at this one, this is not quite as steep or as wide a base as this one over here. You see that difference? If it was a little bit less, some people call those half Rodneys. So it's still a ship decanter, but it's not quite as wide. It's called a half Rodney. But that really only relates to the period ones and not later conical decanters. So yeah, but that shape, I've not seen that shape anywhere in these books. I've not gone punting out and looking everywhere for it. So the next one I'm going to show you is Indian Club, and also I'm going to do it with barrel as well because there's a bit of overlap here. So I consider this to be an Indian Club and this to be a barrel. Yeah. So, but over here, dun, 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 this is an Indian Club in the Robin Butler book. To me, it looks too close to the taper. I don't know what you'd say it was, but yeah. And then over here, this is the Douglas Ash book. This looks like an Indian Club to me, but he's called it barrel. And then they don't have it in. They don't have Indian Club in the Jane Hollingsworth Christie's book, but they do have barrel, which is a bit like a slightly squashed Indian Club. So yeah, slight differences about what an Indian Club and what a barrel is. So there you go. It's a bit confusing, isn't it? And the reason it's a bit confusing is because it's a bit confusing. Yeah, I mean, if I was doing a scholarly article on this, I'd have had a whole palm of books. I'd have photocopied the pages and just put them all next to each other with the different descriptions, and you could have gone, yeah, look at that. But yeah, there are inconsistencies. The way people have drawn the shapes is slightly different. Some of the naming conventions are different. Some people just ignore some shapes altogether. It's all a bit. You just have to go with, this is what I've learned, and just go with it if it seems right. I'm sure I'm not exactly right for what everybody says. Like Sugarloaf seems to be a less common name for Mallet, but I like Sugarloaf because it relates to the shape of the way sugar used to arrive in the 18th century. Where it would, they would make sugar and it would come in a cone shape as a solid block, and you'd have to break it up. So I like the idea of it's that kind of shape. But yeah, it's all, you can go up your own arse, sorry if I've said that word on YouTube, but you can, and do a lot of navel gazing, etc., etc. Look at too many books and completely scramble your brain, which I do all the time. And anyway, so that's different shapes. You saw some shapes. I'm not going to give you an exact prognosis on shapes. The ones that I do like are Royal Nelson and Fancy, because those have come out straight out of a period advert from 1839. So if that's what they called them, that's good with me, because they were the people that were inventing those decanters. So anyway, so that's it for me. I will leave references to the books in the description, and yeah, and please like and subscribe. So yeah, that's my final word. That's like and subscribe, because obviously I need all that popularity. No, I don't. It doesn't matter. You know, this is just for nerds. So anyway, thank you very much. Bye.